Grandpa's Hands is based on the only conversation I ever had with my grandfather. We grew up in a time where, I guess you can say kids didn't speak unless they were spoken to, that type of thing. And whenever we would go to my mama's house, my grandfather would never say anything to us. He would just go to his shed, and he'd come out the shed. He'd give us a piece of sugar cane, a box of Cracker Jacks, a can of Coke, and then he was gone. And that was it. So this story is kind of like loosely based on this one time when I went out to the farm. So I'm gonna go ahead and read it because it's not exactly based on that, but you'll get where I'm coming from. Okay. Michael felt heat radiating from his wood panel bedroom wall and spraying from his bed. The smell of bacon wafted into his room as he hurried into the jeans and sweatshirt he had set out the night before, rested on his tennis shoes, and trotted through the narrow hallway into the kitchen. Mama stood before the stove, one hand holding the black iron skillet in place, while the other scrambled a pair of eggs in a hot pool of bacon grease. "What you doing up so early, boy?" she asked without looking. Michael sat at the dinette, folding his eager hands under his chin. "You going to Grandma's?" he asked. Mama scraped the scrambled eggs onto a plate. "I go out there every Saturday morning. You know that." Michael played with the napkin holder, rocking his head from side to side. "Can I go?" Mama was reaching for the grits but stopped, placing her small hands on her broad hips. "Now, why in the world do you want to go with me?" "'Cause I want to go hunting." Mama rolled her eyes. "You and that gun. I told your daddy not to buy that thing unless he was ready to go hunting with you. His tired behind ain't been out with you yet." She scooped a spoonful of grits on the plate to join the eggs and bacon. "You know you can't go by yourself, and your daddy ain't waking up anytime soon." Michael smothered his grits with pepper. "Uncle Willie would take me." "How you know he's going hunting today? It's close to harvest time. He's probably got chores." Michael piled his eggs on top of his grits and pepper and crumbled the bacon in his hands. "I called him last night, and he said he was going." Mama turned around and looked at him, her eyes wide. "You did what?" She shook her head. Lord, what am I going to do with you?" She began to make her own plate and stopped. "What about that book report you're supposed to be working on? You finished it yet?" "No, ma'am." "No? Then how you expect to go with me when you got homework to do?" "I'll finish it as soon as I get home, Mama. I promise." Mama turned to look at Michael. "What are you writing about?" Michael spread apple jelly on his toast. "I'm supposed to write about my hero. I'm thinking about writing about Frederick Douglass." Michael finished his plate before Mama sat down. "I guess you can go," she said. "But we ain't leaving until I'm ready to leave. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "And I want to see that book report after church tomorrow." "Yes, ma'am." Michael jumped up from his table and ran to Mama and Daddy's room to get the .22 rifle. He hoarded his lawn cutting money all summer to buy it as a birthday present to himself. It was a Springfield Savage .22 semi-automatic long rifle, the perfect gun for squirrel and rabbit hunting, or so the sales clerk at Sears said. Michael eased the door open and crept into the closet beside the bed. Daddy was stretched out on top of the covers in his boxer shorts and T-shirt, snoring through his thick mustache. The closet door creaked when Michael slid it aside, and Daddy's hand came up to scratch his sideburns. Michael froze until he stopped scratching, then slid the door wide open. The gun was hidden behind Mama's Sunday dresses. He took it out, then went to Daddy's loose change drawer where he kept the bullets. There was a brand new pack of 100 shells that felt like money in the boy's hand. Michael strolled into the kitchen, carrying the rifle the way Daddy taught him. Mama looked up from her cup of coffee and grinned despite herself. "You look like your Uncle Bo when he was your age," she said. She got up from the table and headed for the bedroom. "Guess I better get ready. The day ain't getting no longer." Michael washed his plate and went to the den. He laid his gun down on the floor and turned on the TV to watch cartoons. He had almost forgotten about going with Mama when she came into the den. "Cut that mess off and let's go," she said. Michael scrambled to his feet, turned off the TV, and grabbed the gun and bullets. "Now remember what I said. We don't leave till I'm ready." "Yes, ma'am." "And if your Uncle Willie can't take you hunting, you don't go." "Yes, ma'am." "All right, then, let's go." Michael trailed Mama out of the door into the carport and into the 1967 sky blue Malibu. In moments, they were zooming through the neighborhood, down the steep hills between little water oaks that city planted to beautify the landscape. Mama worked her way through the side streets and shortcuts like with the seriousness of a NASCAR driver, reaching Macon Road, the two-lane highway that ran to Grandma's farm. The sky was a crisp autumn blue, empty of the gray haze that sagged low during the summer. The morning sun spread its light across the pine-infested hills. It felt like hunting season, and Michael was excited. He watched the familiar landmarks flash by from his backseat window until he saw the solitary shack that signaled the farm wasn't far away. Mama finally slowed down as the roadside mailboxes came into view. She steered off the paved highway and onto the dirt road. She was creeping as they approached the railroad crossing. Only the section crossing of the road was visible, the rest blocked by a tangle of scrub pines and honeysuckle vines. Mama turned left after crossing the tracks. She drove through a gauntlet of blackberry vines that made Michael's mouth water as he remembered blackberry pie and ice cream. They turned right at the hog pens. The house appeared, flanked by the corn and pea fields. Mama drove down the road to the rear of the house, parking between the house and the shed. Michael jumped out of the car before Mama came to a complete stop, his impatient eyes searching for Uncle Willie. His euphoria was checked by a jerk of his arm that almost lifted him off his feet. "Boy, don't you ever jump out this car like that again." Mama's face was getting me a switch angry. "Don't go hitting that boy," a much older female voice growled. Grandma stood at the screen door of the back patio. Michael blessed her for saving him from what was surely going to be a whooping, or at least a pinch on the arm. She eased down the concrete stairs, wiping her hands on her apron. "Did you see what he did?" Mama said. "He ain't hurt. You'll know better the next time, won't you, Michael?" "Yes, ma'am." Michael followed Mama and Grandma up the stairs. Since he made Mama mad, he sat beside the women in an old folding chair, took his share of butter beans from the bushel, and began shelling. He kept his eyes low and peeled while they talked, waiting for the right moment to ask the question that was burning to get out of his throat. Mama stopped talking as she grabbed another handful of beans. Michael cleared his throat and looked up at Grandmama. "Grandma, is Uncle Willie here?" "Shoot, boy, Willie went hunting right around sunup. He won't be back until dark." Michael slumped over like he had been hit by a brick. He looked at Mama with pleading eyes. "I told you no hunting by yourself with that gun," she reminded him. "I'll take him." Grandpa shuffled in from the kitchen, his hands deep in his overall pockets. He smiled at Michael, flashing his gold tooth, and Michael was filled with dread. "You feel like hunting, Daddy?" Mama asked. "You supposed to be resting." "I don't want to go hunting no more," Michael whispered. "I feel fine," Grandpa replied, pulling his right hand out of his pocket. Michael watched the gnarled skull appendage rise from the old man's bald head to the old man's bald head. It was hideous, like something from the freak show at the fair. When he was small, he always was careful to avoid touching or being touched by that hand and his mirror twin. He thought when he got older, he'd get over the fear, but it was still clinging to him as real as ever. "I don't want to go hunting no more," he said louder. "Is it all right?" Mama asked Grandma. Grandma concentrated on the peas. "The doctor said he needed to get some exercise." "I don't want to go no more," Michael shouted. "Boy, can't you see grown folks talking?" Mama nailed him still with a stare, then returned to her conversation. "Well, Papa, I guess it's okay, but you keep a close eye on him. He can get wild sometimes." "What you mean, you guess it's okay?" Grandpa said. "I'll take this boy anywhere I want to. Come on, Michael, let's go hunting." Michael watched the back of Grandpa's head as he bounced down the stairs. He looked at Mama in desperation. "What you waiting on? Go on now." Michael turned and followed Grandpa down the stairs. He could do this. He was 12 going on 13 with 2 hairs on his chest and the start of a mustache on his upper lip. His confidence had almost returned until he caught a glimpse of those hands pull out a pouch of Red Man chewing tobacco. He jumped past Grandpa and trotted to the car to get his .22. "What you gonna kill with that? Time?" Michael ignored the comment, holding the gun toward the ground like his daddy taught him and making sure the safety was on. "Squirrels and rabbits, sir," he said. Grandpa laughed like a wet growl. "Can't kill no squirrel with that thing. Ain't gonna do nothing but make 'em mad. I should have brought my shotgun." Grandpa started walking, and Michael followed, afraid to say where he wanted to hunt. They followed a trail branching off the dirt road that cut between the barn and the old mule stables. No, can't kill nothing with that thing, Grandpa continued. Can't kill it right, I mean. You shoot a squirrel with that, and it'll be running around mad, hurting and hiding. A shotgun to put it down just like that. Grandpa stopped walking, and Michael almost ran into him. See this? He asked, pointing to a dent between his right thumb and his finger. Shot a squirrel one time and thought it was dead. I guess I should have asked it before I went to pick it up. Damn thing took hold of me right there like a beaver trap. Took a half an hour to get it loose, and it was dead half that time. Michael looked at the spot and grimaced, imagining how painful that must have felt. Suddenly the scar and the hand were gone, sinking deep into Grandpa's pocket. They walked to the second hog pen where the trail ended, the air heavy with the stink of swamp mud and hog droppings. Before them was a turnip green field, the fall plant in full and ready for harvest. Grandpa walked into the field and over to the barbed wire fence separating the field from the woods. Michael hadn't planned on going into those woods. It was a tangle of pine, oaks, and muscadine vines that seemed perpetually dark as it repulsed the sun's attempt to penetrate its core. Blind obedience only went so far. Grandpa, are we going in there? You want to shoot squirrels, don't you? Michael reluctantly nodded his head. Well, this is the best spot for him. At least it was a while back. Come on over here and hold this wire down for me. Michael sat the gun down on the opposite side of the fence, then grabbed the wire carefully, pushing down with his weight. Grandpa stepped over, his hand gripping Michael's shoulder for support. Michael closed his eyes, keeping his head away from that hand. Got to be careful, Grandpa said as he grunted his way over the fence. Once he and Michael were settled, he showed Michael his left hand. When I was about your Uncle Willie's age, I worked for a white man named Mr. Elias Burnside in his sawmill. It was hard work back then because a colored man did whatever the boss man said do, even if it wasn't your job. Well, one day, I was putting up a fence like this one on Mr. Burnside's farm, and before I knew it, I was up to my ankle in fire ants. Boy, I got to jumping around and screaming and tore my hand up on that barbed wire. It took me a long time to get this hand back straight. Michael climbed over the fence. The woods towered before them in black silence, its stillness a final warning to all intruders. Michael's eyes went to Grandpa, waiting for him to lead the way. Instead, Grandpa reached into his pocket, pulled out his red man chewing tobacco, and leaned against the fence post. We stay here and wait, Grandpa said. They'll come to us. Michael never dreamed a more terrible fate. In front of him was the scariest woods on the farm, and beside him was Grandpa. He sat with the rifle across his lap as he watched Grandpa massage his hands. They must hurt all the time, he thought. Maybe he was used to it. The pain was there, but had become part of Grandpa's life, like the receding gray hair on his head. Why are you rubbing your hands, Grandpa? He asked. They get to itching sometime. You got arthritis? Grandpa tilted his head up and leaned and stared at Michael. What? Shoot, boy, ain't nothing wrong with me but old age. These hands are fine. He moved close to Michael and turned his right hand up, pointing at thick yellow circles on his palm below each finger. This comes from hard work, boy. I got these trophies swinging an axe longer than you've been alive. He turned his hand over and placed a finger on a faint line near his pinky finger. See this line here? I got this when your mama was born. We didn't have no hospital for colored folks back then, so the midwife come over from Midland to help deliver her. Your grandmama was going through an awful time, so I slipped in the room and told her to bite on my hand till she felt better. Lord have mercy, that woman can bite. Grandpa chuckled. Michael stared at Grandpa's hand, trying to make up a story about every indentation, line, scar, and curve. They began a game of show and tell, Michael asking and Grandpa telling as the sun passed over them between cotton clouds. Where did those come from? Michael pointed to twin scars ringing Grandpa's wrists. The glow that had been building in the old man's face fled. He straightened and walked away along the fence. Grandpa, wait! Michael jumped to his feet and grabbed his rifle, running until he caught up. Grandpa hummed, his eyes focused somewhere up ahead. Michael grabbed his arm. Come on, Grandpa, let's go back to the house. Grandpa jerked his arm away. You want to know how I got them scars, don't you? Michael dropped his head. Yes, sir. "Come on with me then," Grandpa said. They walked in silence past the peas to the watermelons. Grandpa picked a small melon, walked over to a wide tree stump, and eased himself down. He pulled out his pocket knife and began slicing. Michael sat beside him, and Grandpa handed him a glistening red wedge. "Remember when I told you I worked at Mr. Burnside's mill? Well, I was looking to buy me some land for a farm, and old Burnside heard about it. One day he calls me into his office and offers me this land you're sitting on for $500. At first, I thought he was playing with me, but old Burnside had a habit of doing things for people he liked, white or colored. So I jumped for the deal like a frog in the water, giving him 100 straight out and working out a deal for the other 4. Michael listened as he munched on his melon slice. He imagined Grandpa as a young man, tall and strong like Uncle Willie, pulling logs and plowing fields while fussing at Mama for doing something she wasn't supposed to. The distance between them melted away. The old man with the crippled hands became a real person, father of Mama and Uncle Willie, husband and provider for Grandma. "Well," Grandpa continued, "I took to clearing that land every evening after work, sometimes with my brothers, but most of the time by myself. One evening, I was alone chopping wood when I see a truck rolling up. By the time I figured out what was going on, it was too late to run. 3 white men got out of that truck, and the biggest one had a shotgun. 'What the hell you doing on this land, boy?' he said. 'This is my land,' I says. 'You lying,' the little one said. 'We sold this land to Tom Burnside's, so unless you out here waiting on him, you best be getting on, nigga.' Now, I was so mad I couldn't think straight. 'Mr. Burnside sold me this land,' I yelled. 'I paid for it fair and square.' The big man turned red as fire. 'That son of a bitch,' he said. He turned to the short one and said, 'I told you not to sell land to that old fool. Everybody knows Tom is crazy.' The short man got this evil grin on his face. 'Ain't no problem,' he said. 'This boy's gonna give us our land back. Ain't you, boy?' Grandpa bit into his melon, taking his time to chew. Now, if I hadn't spent so much time clearing and chopping, I would have gave it back. But my sweat was in the ground. It belonged to me. 'This is my land, and I'm keeping it,' I said. The big man started smirking like the devil's son. 'You'll give it back sooner or later,' he said. I tried to run, but they wrestled me down and knocked me out. When I woke up, I was hanging by my wrist from a big old oak tree. The big man had a long piece of rope wrapped around his hand, and as soon as he saw I was awake, he started tearing into me. I wanted to holler so loud the angels would come down and get me, but when I opened my mouth, Amazing Grace came out. I sang that song louder than I ever had in church, and I meant it more too. I tell you, boy, the Lord must have heard your grandpa, because by the time I stopped singing that song, them white men were gone. They left me hanging there, swinging back and forth like a broke branch till about dark. That's when my brother showed up looking for me and cut me down. Michael's hands twisted the stock of his rifle, the veins showing in his forearm. 'What you do to those white men, Grandpa?' Grandpa looked at Michael with a melancholy smile. 'Nothing. Couldn't do a thing. See, back then, the law kept a colored man from being strong on the outside, so you had to be strong in here.' He patted Michael's chest with his hand, and Michael didn't mind. 'No, I didn't do a thing to them, but I cut that damn oak tree down.' Grandpa looked at his wrist, turning his hands back and forth. 'That's how I got these scars, and this how you got this fine sitting stump, right? This sitting stump came to be.' Grandpa struggled to his feet. 'Come on, boy. It's time we be getting back.' Them squirrels looking at us and laughing. 'Okay, Grandpa,' Michael said. He grasped Grandpa's hand and pulled him up. They stood for a moment, his young, smooth hand in Grandpa's leathery, scarred grip. Then they let go and headed for the house. Mama was putting a bunch of collars into the car trunk when Michael and Grandpa walked up. 'So where are all the squirrels?' she asked. 'In the woods,' Grandpa replied. 'That's all right, though. We'll get them next time, right, Michael?' 'Yes, sir. We sure will.' 'Get in the car, baby,' Mama said. Michael emptied the .22 and placed it in the trunk beside the collars. He sat on the passenger side as Mama hugged Grandpa's neck. 'Bye, Daddy. I love you.' Grandpa grunted and walked toward the house. Mama climbed into the car with a smile. That man is something else, she said. Mama started the car and they drove down the road. Michael turned to see Grandpa waving goodbye. He waved it, he smiled and waved back until Grandpa disappeared with distance and dust. Mama, I ain't writing about Frederick Douglass, Michael said. Who you writing about? She asked. I'm writing about Grandpa. Mama turned to look at Michael, her eyes glistening as she smiled at him. Lord have mercy, she said. Lord have mercy.